It's time for Talk Law Radio with Todd Marquardt. Todd Marquardt, attorney at law in Texas. If you're a millionaire or a thousandaire, Talk Law Radio is now on the air. Call in with your business law question, your elder law question, veteran aid, Medicaid, build a business to get paid. 210-308-8867. Or ask a question online at marquardtlawfirm.com. That's MARQUARDT lawfirm.com. And now it's Talk Law Radio with Todd Marquardt.
Welcome to Talk Law Radio. I'm Todd Marquardt on KLUP 930 AM The Answer, on podcasts everywhere, YouTube, Facebook, and talklawradio.com. Today's going to be an extra special show, and we're going to have Lieutenant Colonel U.S. Army retired Jeffrey F. Addicott, full professor of law and director of the Warrior Defense Project at St. Mary's University School of Law in San Antonio, Texas. We're going to be talking about the following hidden legal issues. One, what does it mean for an organization to be designated a terrorist organization by the U.S. Code and regulations? What are the consequences for supporting a terrorist organization? Whether those who attend a rally in support of the terror attack against Israel should be prosecuted for supporting terrorism or should be protected by the First Amendment, freedom of speech, and freedom to assemble. 4, according to just war theory, was Hamas justified in its terror attack against Israel? And whether Israel's response to Hamas's terror attack is justified or not. Why should we support Israel? And finally, we're going to discuss Professor Addicott's accomplishments for the Center for Terrorism Law and the Warrior Defense Project. If you're interested in further analysis about whether terror is justified, order Professor Addicott's book, Union Terror, Debunking the False Justifications for Union Terror Against Southern Civilians in the American Civil War. You can find that on Amazon. And another book that's relevant to our discussion today by Professor Addicott is called Radical Islam. Why? It's got a bright red cover on it. You can find that on Amazon as well. Back to the book Union Terror, which is available on Amazon. It describes the Union's use of terror against innocent civilians during the Civil War and dispels all the false excuses used to justify the burning of thousands of private homes and displacing hundreds of thousands of innocent women and their children to fend for themselves without food in the dead of winter by Sherman and others. So check out those books. Before we get started, let's begin with prayer. Dear God, thank you for this day. Thank you for all the gifts and blessings that you give to us. Thank you for giving us the opportunity to talk about this subject on the radio. Please forgive us for our sins, for our mistakes, for doing the wrong thing or failing to follow your will. Please help Professor Jeffrey Addicott and me give good information about terrorism law today. Help us to use the gifts and talents you have provided for the good of your people, for our own good and for your glory. In Jesus' name, amen. Now it's time to discover your legal issue blind spots by listening to me talk about the law on the radio. Today we're talking with Lieutenant Colonel U.S. Army retired Jeffrey F. Addicott, professor of law and director of Warrior Defense Project at St. Mary's University School of Law here in San Antonio, Texas. Professor, welcome to the show.
My pleasure.
Thank you for joining us. I'm sorry that it has to be under these unfortunate circumstances of war. We also pray for those who are suffering the effects of war. But your experience and expertise is needed in this time. You've been doing a lot of appearances on TV and otherwise, haven't you?
Yes, quite a few.
Okay. Yeah, so one of your specialties is terrorism law. Can you just give us some more background? How did you get into that?
Well, as you know, I did 20 years in the Army. I was the senior legal advisor to all the Green Berets and deployed on numerous missions in undisclosed locations around the world, out of Fort Bragg, now Fort Liberty, and worked in the Pentagon on international operational law issues. I taught at our JAG school, international operational law. So I've been doing this stuff in the real world for about 20 years, and then I retired and became a law professor after 9/11 at St. Mary's University School of Law. We founded the Center for Terrorism Law to address all the legal and policy issues associated with the attack on our country on 9/11. And in that context, of course, I, contributed to our effort to defeat our enemies, which consisted of that poison tree, which we call radical Islam. It has a lot of poison branches on that tree. The branch that attacked us directly was Al Qaeda, supported by the Taliban. So, I went to Guantanamo Bay. I assisted with the military commission process there directly. I met with President Bush 4 times, testified before the Senate, worked with the White House on a variety of legal issues in support of our war effort, to include the newly, created U.S. Combatant Command, NORTHCOM. And so, I've been doing this for quite some time. And so it's a pleasure to be able to revisit these issues. But a lot of people ask, when will it end? And the answer is never. It'll never be over.
So the first thing I thought of when I heard that Hamas had attacked Israel was that this was a known terrorist organization.
Correct.
And when universities students started having rallies in support of that, I immediately thought that they were going to somehow get in trouble for supporting terror. And so I wanted to begin with what are the consequences for an organization to be designated as a terrorist organization?
Sure. That concept dates back to 1996, when the Congress passed the Material Support Act as a part of a larger package, and it's found at 18 U.S.C. 2339 Alpha and 2339 Bravo. And the Material Support Act makes it a crime punishable by 20 years in jail and a fine for anyone to knowingly provide support, and hence the term material support, to a designated terrorist organization. So the next, the next question you ask would be, well, is Hamas a designated terrorist organization, and who designates these entities as terrorist organizations? The designation, of course, is by the Secretary of State. And yes, they are a designated terrorist organization. They're an offspring of the Muslim Brotherhood, which is another dedicated terrorist organization, which is also related to Iran, which is a state sponsor of terrorism, designated by all Republican and all Democrat, administrations in this country. So Hamas is a terrorist organization, and therefore whoever provides material support to Hamas is in violation of federal law and can be put in jail for 20 years. In fact, if I can just go on a little bit, right here in Texas
Sure.
in 2006, I believe, we had a very, infamous case in Dallas, Texas. It was the federal prosecutors had gone against an organization called the Holy Land Foundation, and they found them guilty and their top 5 leaders of providing material support to, guess who? Hamas. And the leaders were sentenced to 65 years, another one 65 years, another one 15 years, and another one 20 years and 20 years. These individuals were funneling in money in this so-called Holy Land Foundation charity, but it was a phony front. They were diverting it directly into Hamas. And of course, their defense was, well, the money we send, we intend for it to go to the humanitarian part, because Hamas is the government of, the Gaza Strip. We only intend for the money to go to building schools and, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, was the defense. The judge said, no, money is fungible. And I'm quoting from the court case, and in the hands of terrorists, it supports their overall objective of terrorism. So the fact that you think you're giving money to a hospital, and that's your excuse, no, you're knowingly providing material support to Hamas, whether, wherever it's designated, it's a terrorist organization. So that defense will not work. And again, they were convicted not just of material support, they were also convicted, obviously, of conspiracy, fraud on the IRS and other, criminal acts. But the Material Support Act gives you 20 years unless they can directly link your money to someone that died, then you can get life in prison.
Oh, wow. Well, we're going to have to take a break, but thank you for setting that up. When we return, we'll talk about what does material support mean besides money. So stay tuned.
New to San Antonio? If you move from out of state, your estate plan may not be aligned with Texas laws. Did you know 41 states treat property ownership differently than Texas? Protect your assets and loved ones. As a newcomer to Texas, it's essential to review your estate plan with an experienced attorney. Marquardt Law Firm is here to help. Chat with us online at marquardtlawfirm.com to schedule a consultation. That's MARQUARDT lawfirm.com.
Welcome back to Talk Law Radio. I'm Todd Marquardt on KLUP 930 AM The Answer. Podcasts everywhere, Facebook, YouTube, and talklawradio.com. Today we're talking with a very special guest, Professor Jeffrey Addicott, who has his Doctor of Laws, also 2 Master of Laws degrees, and spent 20 years in the military teaching the military how to comply with law. Welcome back to the show, Professor. Okay.
Thank you. I'm going to have a great-looking tombstone if the rapture doesn't occur first.
Before the break, you talked about the part of the code that says that what a terrorist organization is, and you mentioned a court case about a group in Dallas that did support Hamas, and they are serving in prison now. Let's define what is material support besides money.
Yeah. So there's 2 elements, as you correctly point out, Todd. One is, what is material support? And the statute defines it primarily as money, but it also can be that you go to a training camp, and we convicted a lot of individuals in this country that, went into the Taliban training system and, the Al-Qaeda training camps, rather, and they, provided training, direct training to that organization, and they participated in that organization. But most of the cases are about, you're providing money. And again, this is difficult for many Muslims, because part of the requirements in Islam is for you to give to a charity. That's part of their formula. One of the pillars of Islam is to give to a charity. So a lot of Muslims that, they unknowingly gave money to the Holy Land Foundation, because on their website, they don't say we're supporting Hamas, a terrorist organization. They're very secretive about it. And so people that gave money to the Holy Land Foundation, they weren't convicted because they lacked the knowledge element, the mens rea, as we say, as you know. But the 5 senior leadership members of the organization, many of them had direct links to Hamas, family members. I mean, it was an overwhelming amount of evidence. They were convicted because they knowingly did it.
Okay.
And also, as an ad note, you might have heard of CARE, which is a very strong political organization here in this country that, says that they represent Muslims in America. They were an unindicted co-conspirator in that case as well.
Okay. So what about the conspiracy? Could that happen?
Well, in the Holy Land Foundation case, it did. They were able to prove that they were conspiring to directly, in other words, they were lying. Their public front was we're a charity, but behind the scenes, it was clear that they knew exactly that money was going to pay, for example, the so-called martyrs and the families of martyrs, and money to actually people that were organizing and engaging in terror. They were able to prove that. Hence, you got the 65 years. For 2 of them, got 65 years in jail. And the fine also was $12.4 million.
Okay. Will the students at universities that have been attending rallies somehow get in trouble for supporting a terror organization?
Well, no, because we have our First Amendment, as you're well aware of that. I know you know these answers already, so thank you for having me to say them. Yeah. So in other words, freedom of speech. You can praise Osama bin Laden, or whatever you want.
There's a lot of cases about the Ku Klux Klan.
Yeah, exactly. When the ACLU used to be involved in protecting freedom of speech, they actually, went to bat protecting the KKK's right to hold a rally. Today, they have degenerated into an organization that only is concerned with one side of the political spectrum. But true libertarians, you have the right to be an idiot. You have the right to say, the most outrageous things, support, like, as I said, Osama bin Laden. You can hang the communist flag in your office or the Hamas flag or the ISIS flag. Not illegal. It's only illegal when you engage in violence, conspire to engage in violence, Material Support Act, as we discussed, solicit someone to engage in violence, and that's the criminal part of it. So students that are running around, supporting Hamas, any rational person would say to themselves, these people, one, are either totally uneducated and propagandized, or they're just stupid.
There was a rally or a protest at the Capitol recently, and somebody commented on my LinkedIn post about whether or not those people were going to be arrested, just like the protest on January 6th. But I haven't seen that. Have you?
Yeah, they arrested, I think, between 200 and 300 of them, but I doubt if any of them were put in pretrial confinement. They were probably released rather quickly because, sadly, there's a political element to everything. If the Democrats are in power, the Republicans will always say you're doing a lousy job. If the Republicans are in power, the Democrats will always say you're doing a lousy job. Mm-hmm. So we, as mainstream America, we kind of go through the politics, put it aside, and see what's really happening. But yes, they trespassed into the rotunda. They were, chanting and parading around, as most of the January 6 people were. The small minority were engaged in fisticuffs and low levels of violence. To my knowledge, they weren't engaging in violent behavior, but they were doing what the mass of people did on January 6th. Is just you trespassed and you're parading. But again, I'm not involved with the Department of Justice, but I do know arrests were made. I don't know, what the follow-up is going to be in those cases. But again, back to your original question, people have the right to be wrong, and that's part of the beauty of America. And as most of us, we're very tolerant. You dress the way you want to dress. You can, express views that you want to express. That's what we're all about. Mm-hmm. And we're supposed to debate those, and hopefully the truth will be stronger than falsehoods, and people will basically come around to the truth. And the truth in this case, of course, you see so much disinformation from these groups. Just if you just Google it, you can see that Israel is not an occupier. They are a state. They have a little card at the United Nations that says Israel on it. Mm-hmm. They have the right to exist. They have their borders. So how can you be a colonial occupying power? And again, the goal of Hamas is to take over the entire state of Israel. They believe they're illegitimate.
Well,
it's not true.
I'm sure you wrote about this in your book called Radical Islam, Why? But just briefly for the listeners today, there is that argument that those at the rally are making that the Palestinians were there first. Do you know who was there first, and does it matter?
Yeah, I don't know who was there first because that's been, 10,000, 15,000 years ago. But we do know one thing about human history. You show me any piece of land and somebody was there first. If you just take Texas, mm-hmm. We're United States now. Before that, we were the Confederate States of America. Before that, it was the United States of America. Before that, it was the Republic of Texas. Before that, it was, Mexico. Before that, it was Spain. Before that, it was Comanche. So whatever group wants to get together and say we're reclaiming the land that used to be ours, that argument was washed away in 1945. It's illogical in any event because every place used to be somebody, and mm-hmm. you can call that person that's there now a colonial power or a crusader or what do you want to call it. It's irrelevant. The starting point is 1945 when the United Nations was created, and the vast majority of nations have signed the charter. And that's the starting point. Are you a member of the United Nations? We don't care where you came from. We don't care what the history was. That was Saddam Hussein's excuse when he went into Kuwait. That used to be our 12th province. Well, maybe it did and maybe it didn't, but that's irrelevant. It's Kuwait today. And the same argument with Israel. It's Israel today. They have the right to exist as a nation state. They're recognized by the United nations. They're recognized by the vast majority of countries in the world. They are not colonializers. They're not occupiers. They have a state. Now, the issue is, do the Palestinians want a state? Because nations rise and nations fall. Yes, they want a state. I'm not opposed to the Palestinians having a state. But if you're a peacemaker and you want to try to solve this problem and not just engage in hyperbole, you quickly realize that Israel is like the size of New Jersey. There's not enough land, let alone for the 9 million Israelis there, than the millions of Palestinians. I would say Egypt and Jordan, which have huge countries, why don't you step up to the plate, carve off a piece of geography, and make it a Palestinian state? Problem solved.
But even Israel has in the past offered to give them land for their own state, and they rejected it.
Yes, that's President Clinton. When you negotiate as a lawyer, we like to negotiate. That's what we lawyers do. Most cases are settled by negotiation. We loosen up our tie. I don't have one today. And you would say to the other party, what would you want? Well, if you had a Hamas person sitting across the table from you, their response would be, thank you very much for that question. I want to kill you. That doesn't leave us a counteroffer.
Right.
Yes, it's true that the Israelis gave the Palestinian representatives, Yasser Arafat at the time, 95% of everything they wanted on the table. That's pretty good. If I can negotiate and get 95% of what I want, I'm going to take that deal. Mm-hmm. And they rejected it because that tells you everything you need to know. They're not interested in resolving this issue. Their interest lies, as the Hamas charter says, we want to kill you all. And they've shown it with their despicable acts on October the 7th.
So let's talk about just war theory. What do they still follow that? What is the theory now? So just war theory is it's a Catholic Church tradition, and it deals with when do you go to war. And there's several elements to it, and they look at the cost and benefit, who's the aggressor, who started the war, proportionality, things like that. It's related to the law of self-defense, right?
Yes, related to the law of self-defense. But that's kind of all today in the international community. We don't use that term anymore. I use it myself in academic papers, but the measuring stick now is the UN Charter since 1945. And in there, Article 51, it says every nation has the inherent right to defend themselves if they are attacked. And then it gives the Security Council, which is the 5 permanent members, the authority to determine who is the aggressor in any given, fight. Well, in this case, so our analysis starts with Article 2.3 and 2.4 says that all nations must settle disputes by peaceful means, negotiation, settlement. And if you can't settle it by peaceful means, then you go to the Security Council and ask them to arbitrate it for you. Well, again, Hamas is not a nation state, but they're still tied under those rules. They're kind of like a virtual state, like Al-Qaeda, I suppose. And so so the question is, who started this particular war that we're in right now? And any normal, rational person can tell you that Hamas is the one that blew the holes in the wall, came in and slaughtered, almost 1,500 Israelis.
Innocent people.
The body count is still being counted. And they took about 200 plus hostages and all the stuff that we saw with it, the rape, the burning, the pillaging, just atrocities that shock the conscience.
And that all fits under the definition of terror.
Yeah, and those are acts of terror, which is true, but they're also illegal acts. Even a nation at war can't engage in those acts. They're illegal under the law of war. And, of course, they're illegal under any concept of human consciousness. So they started this war. And a lot of people now that, support the Palestinians, well, we want a ceasefire. It doesn't go that way. You don't get to do these atrocities and say, okay, let's have a ceasefire into the next group of atrocities. Israel has the right under Article 51 to defend themselves, and also the inherent right, and also to get any allies to join them in this process. And thankfully, this president has seen fit to provide at least some support to Israel. And so they've got to go in and do what they've got to do. They've got to clean out the Hamas organization. Will there be casualties? Yes, that's the nature of war. But the difference is the Israelis, they don't target civilians. That's not true, as we saw with the propaganda with the hospital bombing. When I heard that, when it first came out on CNN, and they just picked it up and ran from the Hamas propaganda puppets, I knew it was false. I've worked with the IDF. I've been there. They don't target hospitals. And so finally the truth came out. But yeah, there will be casualties because the law of war allows, if you're targeting a military target, collateral damage, you don't target the civilians, but if they die, then it's allowed under the law of war. It's not a war crime. And we know that Hamas actually uses civilians to put them in hospitals, so you won't, and they put their missiles.
We got to take a break. We'll be right back. Welcome back to Talk Law Radio. I'm Todd Marquardt here on KLUP 930 AM The Answer. Also podcasts everywhere, Facebook, YouTube, and talklawradio.com. Today, my very special guest is Lieutenant Colonel, U.S. Army retired, Jeffrey F. Addicott. He's a full professor of law and director of the Warrior Defense Project at St. Mary's University School of Law here in San Antonio, Texas. And we'll save some time at the very end today in segment 4 to talk about the Warrior Defense Project. But we've been talking about so far the war in Israel and the terror attacks that Hamas made against Israel. And we've been talking about what does it mean for an organization to be designated as a terrorist organization, and what are the consequences for supporting a terrorist organization. Then we talked about the rallies in support of the Palestinians or in support of the attack. I don't know why people are attending rallies, but I've just been hearing about those in the news. Then we talked about just war theory and whether Hamas was justified in their attack, whether Israel was justified in its response. And so now I would like to talk about something that I heard on Thursday. I went to an event at Temple Bethel where the former United States Ambassador Dennis Ross to Israel spoke. And one thing he said is that Hamas cannot be defeated. Hamas is an idea. And so because it cannot be eliminated, it has to be discredited. How do you feel about that?
Well, he's got one thing right. As the Lord Christ said, there's going to be wars and rumors of wars until I come back. He ain't back. So yes, there's always another Hamas. There's always another ISIS. There's always another Al-Qaeda. Evil is amongst us. It was here before we were born. It's here now. It'll be here when we're gone. So some people are very naive. Well, this will be the last war. Mm-hmm. It'll never be the last war. And so you just have to confront it. It's like crime. And you have to be strong. You have to have a strong military. You have to use deterrence because obviously, for example, the United States, we can't fight everybody all the time. So we use the concept of deterrence. President Trump was brilliant at using deterrence. This administration, no, quite the opposite. Our enemies are not deterred. They perceive that we are weak. They perceive that we might have the capabilities, but we don't have the desire or the will to do anything. And we saw that, of course, with our defeat in Afghanistan and the Russian invasion and the rattling of sabers of China. So, it is an idea, just like Nazism is an idea. Mm-hmm. But, whatever the next generation will have to face, and so you just have to confront it. The Israelis have been confronting this since they were founded in 1948. The response from all the neighbors surrounding the state of Israel when they were recognized as a legitimate state, what did they do? They didn't say, hey, welcome to the neighborhood. They attacked them and tried to kill them all. And they've been trying to do that with wars for the last umpteen years, and that's going to continue, apparently. So the Israelis, of course, have to constantly defend their right to exist, and they have a right to exist. Again, you can protest, you can do whatever you want. It's a free country. I salute you for doing that. But I wish you would look at the other side if that's your mindset, because no matter how thin the coin, there's always two sides to it. But most people, they don't want to look at the other side. I've got my mind made up, the Israelis, and then fill in the blank. They'll use these little terms like colonizers or whatever it is. It's simply not historically accurate. It's not logical thinking. It's not critical thinking, that's for sure.
So I like to think that I support Israel, not because I know anybody over there, but because I share values with them. We have the same 10 Commandments, and we have shared democracy. Why do you think we should support Israel?
Same with you, Todd. They share our values. I mean, the Judeo-Christian ethics, but the values of freedom of speech, freedom of religion, freedom of press, Hamas doesn't have that. And again, I think Dennis Prager said it best. He said, imagine if the Israelis laid down their guns, what would happen? They'd be destroyed. Imagine what would happen if Hamas laid down their guns. What would happen? Peace would break out. Mm-hmm. And that's kind of the bottom line. Again, their negotiating position is, we want to kill you. And the Israelis, for too long, in my opinion, they've been very soft on Hamas, very soft on Hezbollah to their north. And that puts them in a very dangerous situation, just as we've been very soft under the Biden administration with Iran. Iran is a state sponsor of terrorism. And then just circle back to our first segment. I'm sure some of your listeners thought, well, if you can't supply material support, which is money to a terrorist organization, how's the Biden administration sending them $100 million? Wouldn't that be a violation of the Material Support Act? Yeah. How are they allowing Iran to get billions of dollars by not enforcing the embargo? Isn't that a violation of the Material Support Act? And, of course, the government exempts himself from that statute. But as a practical matter, you're doing exactly what you are prohibited, what we're prohibited from doing under federal law.
So you think that if we stopped sending money, then that would help deter these types of attacks?
No question about it, because the puppet master is Iran. And Iran is going to get a nuclear weapon. And you think it's bad now, just wait what happens when they get a nuclear weapon. So we've got to deal with the bigger issue of Iran, because they supply $750 million to Hezbollah every year. They supply almost the same amount to Hamas every year. Without that money, these organizations could not build these missiles and bombs and guns and things of that nature. Iran is the head of the snake. And again, everybody knows it. And why are we negotiating with them? You cannot negotiate with evil and expect them to keep their word. If you're a student of history, the British tried to do that with Adolf Hitler. They came back, hey, we got a peace treaty, yay. I mean, you're naive beyond naive. With dictatorships and totalitarian regimes, you negotiate from a position of strength. The only thing they understand is deterrence, the application of lawful violence, or, deterrence. And so Iran has to be dealt with. I know one thing, the time to stop Iran is before they get the nuclear weapon, not afterwards. It's too late.
Good point. I wanted to ask you to talk about your book, Radical Islam. Why? Because I think it's a good time for this to be taught in universities so that people don't buy into the misinformation that Hamas and the Palestinians have a superior right to live there.
Yeah, so the root, as you indicated earlier, is what I call radical Islam. Now, the vast majority of Muslims, they do not buy into this ideology of radical Islam, but a lot of them do. And of course, the ones that do, they believe that they have an obligation to conquer the world for God, Allah. And they will kill anyone that stands in their way. And oh, by the way, so I'm not accused of Islamophobia, they have killed more Muslims than Christians and Jews. So they will kill anybody that stands in their way. Again, let me repeat that. They've killed more Muslims than Christians or Jews.
Wow.
And so it's, that's the problem. Now, many of these people, for example, in Afghanistan, the vast majority of the population, they can't read and they can't write. They can't even read the Quran to know what's in it. You have these radicalized individuals that tell them that the Quran commands you to kill and murder. And they point to certain verses in the Quran. There are violent verses in the Quran. There's peaceful verses in the Quran. Mm-hmm. They go straight to the violent verses and they say, this is the will of God. And if you die in combat, you do not have to go to the judgment seat of Allah, because it's a works religion. You work your way in, good deeds, mm-hmm. rituals, then you're judged at the judgment seat of Allah. You either go to heaven or hell. That's classic Islam. But you can bypass that and you can go straight to heaven without going to the judgment seat of Allah if you die in jihad, which means you literally die fighting the infidels. And So that's still a works process because you have to kill yourself in combat.
But we could do a lot of good by just teaching people how to read.
Well, yeah. I mean, you've got to close down the Hitler youth camps because, again, in Germany, they had Hitler youth camps where they propagandized the kids. Mm-hmm. We know that Hamas puts out literature to little children in their schools, in their elementary schools, about hating the Jews, killing the Jews, and this is occupied land, and we need to, take back Jerusalem and take back the whole thing. So, and the kids, that's all they hear,
right.
And therefore they grow up, and there you go. I call it closing down the Hitler youth camps. In the long term, you need to close down the Hitler youth camps, and the best people to do that is Islam. They need to have a reformation to, do that type of activity. And again, it's not going to happen overnight. But in the short term, when these individuals in Hamas and Hezbollah and the Muslim Brotherhood and Iran use violence, we have to respond with lawful violence. They use illegal violence. We use lawful violence.
Okay, well, when we come back after the break, let's talk more about those distinctions. We just have a minute left. But I wondered, could the neighboring countries do more to provide a stable government and a stable education system for the children?
Oh, yeah. The hypocrisy is beyond belief. The Egyptians, on the other side of the Gaza Strip is the Egyptian side. They close the border. They will not allow the Palestinian civilians to come into their territory in Egypt to set up refugee camps. And yet they cry crocodile tears for the Palestinians, and yet they have the ability right there on the ground, open up the gates, let them in. We will fund them and, house and vet the individuals so they're not Hamas members, but they won't do it. And so the Israelis are blamed, but why not blame the Egyptians that are right there? And there's a lot of land in the Sinai Peninsula there, huge amounts of land.
We got to take another break. We'll be right back.
New to San Antonio? If you move from out of state, your estate plan may not be aligned with Texas laws. Did you know 41 states treat property ownership differently than Texas? Protect your assets and loved ones. As a newcomer to Texas, it's essential to review your estate plan with an experienced attorney. Marquardt Law Firm is here to help. Chat with us online at marquardtlawfirm.com to schedule a consultation. That's MARQUARDT lawfirm.com.
Welcome back to Talk Law Radio. I'm Todd Marquardt on KLUP 930 AM The Answer. Podcasts everywhere, Facebook, YouTube, and talklawradio.com. I'm here talking with special guest, Lieutenant Colonel U.S. Army retired Jeffrey F. Addicott, who is a full professor of law and director of the Warrior Defense Project at St. Mary's University School of Law in San Antonio, Texas. We've been talking about the war between Israel and Hamas, and we've been talking about what is lawful versus unlawful use of force here. So let's pick up there, Professor.
Sure. I mean, we talked about people, need to inform themselves about things, and again, Christians, for example, you'll see many Christians that will carry these signs that will say, thou shalt not kill, and violence never solves anything. Did you ever read the Bible? It doesn't say thou shalt not kill. It says thou shalt not murder. A big difference. Sometimes people need killing. Criminals need to be executed when they are found guilty of vile murder. The Bible authorizes the death penalty. It's legal and it's moral. Same with combat. That's how you win a war, is by killing the enemy, and that's not murder. As long as we are targeting combatant soldiers and abiding by the law of war, which both, by the way, was set out by Moses. They had their own law of war about what you could and couldn't do. So we follow these civilized laws of war, which are very deep in our heritage, and we have to engage in war from time to time. I also remind people that, Jesus himself holds a record for killing people, 185,000 Assyrians outside the gate of Jerusalem, when Hezekiah was king. So, yeah, people need to discern, exactly what is happening here. So, yes, I wish we had a world where there was no war. I wish we had no crime. But as my great-grandmother said, you can spit in one hand and wish in the other and see which one fills up first. You have to deal with reality as reality exists, or you will get a whole lot of people killed. So we should work for periods of where we can expand the time between wars, but you're not going to get rid of wars by negotiating with totalitarian regimes. Just if you're just a armchair student of history, you can see that's not true. It's just not going to happen. So the Israelis have the right and they have the responsibility to protect their own people to engage in this conflict. But yes, it'll never be over. There'll be another conflict probably in 5 or 10 years with another banner. And that's just the way humans are.
And another book that you wrote called Union Terror talks about why it's not unjustified to use terror in any war, even the Civil War.
Yeah, I mean it's a wonderful book. It's called Union Terror, and what I did in the book is most people are kind of vaguely familiar with Sherman marching across Georgia, about a 30-day march from Atlanta to Savannah. And then they said, well, they know that he had to go into some farms and do this and do that. Well, the horror that he inflicted on innocent civilians is not as bad as Hamas, of course, but it was pretty despicable. And they violated the law of war as it then existed. And I dispelled all the false justifications. One of them was, he said, well, I had to take food and, provisions from the civilians because my army couldn't survive without it. That was an out and out lie. In the book, I dispelled that. He took along with him 10,000 cattle when he left Atlanta, 2,500 brand new wagons, stuffed with enough supplies and food to last the entire march. He didn't need to take an ear of corn. They did it because they were trying to burn out civilians to get them to stop the war. He engaged in war crimes. He engaged in terrorism. They burned down civilian homes of women and children. The men were all gone. And black Southerners, white Southerners, no distinction whatsoever. Free blacks, enslaved blacks, no distinction whatsoever. And I've got it all documented in the book. And so, interestingly, in 1944, the Germans had a magazine called Signal. On the front cover, they had a picture of General Grant, who authorized the movement. And in the magazine, they talked about the war crimes that the Union had committed on innocent civilians. And their message, of course, the Allies were just landing in 1944. Their message was, you can expect the same treatment civilians from the Americans. They were using it as their own propaganda element. So there's no excuse for engaging in war crimes, and our hands are not clean, of course. But you learn from the past. You learn from these things. You move forward. You educate yourself, and hopefully we're doing a better job than we have done a better job. And hopefully by remembering these lessons from the past, we won't repeat those mistakes.
Tell us about the work that you did with the Center for Terrorism.
Right. So the Center for Terrorism Law, as I indicated earlier in the show, I just worked closely with the Bush administration and during the height of the war on terror during his 8 years in office. And, of course, worked with the Trump administration as well. When ISIS was destroyed, radical Islam kind of went back in their holes, because it's hard to say God's on your side when your leader, al-Baghdadi, is dead. Your cities that you took over and raped and pillaged your way across Syria and Iraq, you've been eradicated. And so the attacks across Europe of supporters of ISIS, they kind of stopped. And, of course, so we switched gears to our Warrior Defense Project, where I've been doing this on the side now for about 15 years, defending soldiers wrongfully accused of misconduct in the performance of their duties, ranging in cases, soldiers charged with murder for shooting the enemy in combat, soldiers' careers destroyed because they violated the supercilious rules of engagement when they were fighting the enemy, all sorts of cases. I've defended doctors that, dared to give medical exemptions to people that didn't want the COVID shot, and they were basically crucified for, going against the narrative at the time. So, yeah, just a lot of different cases ranging from A to Z. And
how does it work? You have students that help you with that, right?
Yes, I have law students that help me do that, and they get the benefit of learning, a lot of valuable skills, ranging from interviewing witnesses to deposition skills, to research, writing. And so, yeah, they rotate in. My bad news, of course, I've only got them for about a year and a half before they graduate, and then I got new ones I have to train all over again. So But yeah, it's a valuable experience for them. And to my knowledge, we're the only law school in the country that actually does this. And again, I've done 150 cases, and we don't charge a dime for it. If anybody would like to get more information, please contact me, because we're always looking for benefactors, because it costs money to fly to Fort Bragg and back, and to hire expert witnesses and do all the other things that we have to do. So I'm always seeking people that would like to, to support us, and we're very cognizant of where those dollars go. So again, it's all pro bono to the soldiers.
And what number should they call, or how should they get in touch if they do want to make a donation?
Sure. Just call me directly, because I always, I'm very cautious about donating myself. I always tell people, hey, come to our law school. Let me give you a tour of the facility. Let me show you what we do, because there's so many scam artists out there these days, as you know and I know. So I always tell people, do your due diligence about who you're giving your money to. So yeah, just call me. You can look that information up on the St. Mary's website. My email's there, and I'll be more than happy to meet with anybody and give you a tour of our facility and show you exactly what we do. We have an annual report that comes out which details all the cases, where every penny goes, and what we do. But
you're director of that program through St. Mary's, right? It's
Yes.
Under the umbrella of St. Mary's?
Sure is. St. Mary's Law School. So my cell is 887-0429, which is 210. So 887-0429.
Okay, great. Now, do the students have to learn some type of military code of conduct as opposed to like state criminal defense law?
There's a lot of similarities. For example, the federal rules of evidence are exactly the same as the military rules of evidence, word for word. But I do like to, if I can, I like to get law students that have a military background, because when I say things like TDY or the acronyms, they, oh, I know what that is.
Mm-hmm.
So people that don't have a military background, they have a higher learning curve to learn the military way of doing things.
Okay, and do you have a large percentage of students coming from the military?
We do. So it's a lot of folks that are, in the National Guard or prior service, and so I'd say about half of the people that help me have a military background of some sort, but it's not a requirement. The only requirement I've got is that, are you a worker?
Right, good work ethic.
Good work ethic, and I'd rather have someone that has a great work ethic as a B student than someone that's just really smart and has a bad work ethic and is an A student.
Yeah, me too. You mentioned your grandmother, something she said about spit in one hand and hope in the other. Was she important to you?
Actually, she was my great-grandmother, and she was from Alabama. Her father actually was one of the soldiers that fought Sherman. So it was a very interesting. I'm a Southerner, so my Southern heritage is very important to me, which is also, of course, under attack from people that want to attack everything Southerners evil, et cetera, et cetera. So, yeah, she was very important, and our family, of course, has a long military history. We fought in the American Revolution. My dad's a World War II veteran, shot down the Korean War. I myself am a veteran, so. Yeah, we're all about God and country from as long as I can think. And, parents have an obligation to raise their kids with these basic values, so you know what the truth is. Don't leave it to the school system. As we're saying, many things in the school system are disoriented to reality as well. Many things are good, many things are not good. But parents ultimately have the right and the responsibility to raise good citizens in this country, because if we don't have people that are willing to love this country and fight for this country, we won't have a country at all.
Amen. Thank you so much for joining me. We're going to have to end the show, but I wanted to express gratitude from Talk Law Radio, Marquardt Law Firm, and all patriots in this area. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks, Todd. My pleasure.
So I also wanted to mention some things in the news locally. With San Antonio growing, you'll see a bunch of traffic on 1604. There's going to be a road closure there between I-10 and Military on 1604, so you don't want to run into that this weekend. And that just so happens to be the area where I have to drive to get to my office. So, but thank goodness it's the weekend and I won't have to drive that route now. Something else that came up that was funny I saw was the zoo will allow you to bring your pet to the zoo today. And Lexi, my little white dog, really wanted to go. But unfortunately, after I leave the radio station today, I have to head to the office. I'm going to have some consultations with people, and that'll take up my whole afternoon. And so Lexi's a bit disappointed, but she was happy to get to come to the radio station today. If you have any comments or questions about terrorism law, you can email me at host@talklawradio.com. That's HOST@talklawradio.com. I'm Todd Marquardt. I'll talk to you later.